Pod Candy,
a podcast about cults, crimes, and killers. In this episode, we're stepping into the rotting farmhouse of one of the most terrifying figures in American true crime history, Ed Gein.
To the people of Plainfield, Wisconsin, Ed was a quiet, if slightly off, handyman. But when police entered his home in 1957, they uncovered a scene straight out of a nightmare. Bowls made from skulls, chairs upholstered in human skin, and a suit, stitched together from the flesh of a dead woman, that he admitted to wearing. Yum!
What drove him to such depravity? The answer in part lies with his mother, Augusta Gein, a fanatically religious woman who preached that women were instruments of the devil. She kept Ed isolated from the world, feeding him guilt, shame, and fear like it was holy scripture. When she died, something inside him snapped.
And Ed didn't just kill, he collected. Most of his gruesome trophies came not from murder, but from graves he robbed under the cover of night. He wasn't just obsessed with death. He wanted to be someone else entirely. Someone who could bring his mother back. Someone who could silence the demons she planted in him.
His crimes shocked the nation and inspired some of the most infamous monsters in pop culture. But the real Ed Gein? He was far more terrifying than any movie villain.
Outside my windows, it's only raining. When the wind blows, I feel pain. I don't need no doctor.
Stacey, I knew nothing about this man.
Really?
I hear of, I watch so much stuff, as you know. I knew literally the name did not come across to me until Ryan Murphy announced that he was doing another Monsters series starring that Charlie Hunnam. And that is how I'm like, oh, can we do an episode on Ed Gein? I know nothing about this man.
And I should also mention that we watched a documentary called Ed Gein, which was produced and directed by my very own brother, Alex, and his business partner, Adam. They put it together, produced it, and it's really wonderful. It's about 45 minutes, and it's got some interviews, and it's really cool. And that's what we used as our source material.
There's something about Gein that appeals to the morbid curiosity within all of us. It's so macabre, so bizarre, so deviant that we can't look away.
As you know, and as some people know, the characters that were inspired by Ed Gein, and Ed Gein had such a large, he did so many really disgusting things, in my opinion. I'm sure you agree, though. Did a lot of really disgusting things. And later I'm going to ask Dr. Mayer, Dr. John Mayer, our resident doctor on staff. We decided to ask him back, by the way. He's going to be so happy. Yeah, he's going to be really happy because last week he was on thin ice, and now we decided to bring him back.
We were talking about firing the doctor.
Yeah, the doctor, but now we brought him back. So Ed Gein, so psychotic that he inspired Norman Bates from Psycho, and inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Murder Massacre.
Murder Massacre.
And he inspired Silence of the Lambs, the Buffalo Bill character, who
Yep.
made, objects out of human skin, etc.
There was what the police called a mammary vest, the upper torso of a woman that Gein had taken from the body and preserved and attached straps to. And then there were leggings that had been made from the skin of a woman's legs.
And at times, it was reported that he would sometimes walk around with this mammary vest that he had managed to make from female anatomy, and he would attach it to his body.
And apparently also sometimes take one of the female genitals that he had removed from a corpse and stick those on himself as well and pretend to be a woman.
This story, first of all, he lived in a farmhouse with his mother, Augusta, his father, who died earlier on, and his brother, Henry, who also died in a fire. Mysteriously, I should add, in my opinion.
And other opinions.
And other opinions. When they found Henry after this fire, he had marks on him that seemed to appear that he didn't die just from asphyxiation from fire, but also from, murder, possibly. So as we know, Ed Gein only killed, that we know of, 2 women. And in my opinion as well, he simulated his mother out of the skin of these women, created a human suit so he could literally be her. What do you think of that, Dori?
I think that I would never wear a flesh suit.
Why?
Okay, so yes, this definitely all stems from, and when we bring out the doctor, we can talk to him about this, but
Yes.
the mother was extremely religious
Mm-hmm.
and really kept the 2 boys from ever socializing. Women were terrible. You can't have a lot of friends or any friends, and really kept them so isolated, where Henry, the older brother, went out and started really questioning what was going on, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe like there is a world. But Ed stayed so devout to his mother, and she was his life.
His mother had completely undermined his manhood in every way. And at her funeral, he was reacting like a little schoolboy who had just lost his mommy, and just crying hysterically.
Everything that he knew in the world seemingly was gone. That was his one link with sanity that was remaining at that point.
We all get very upset when a loved one passes away, but that was his whole entire existence, was
His whole
her.
existence was her. And, it was almost like when Henry was gone, he had her to himself. And unfortunately, she died shortly thereafter of a stroke. And then he was alone. And I think when he was alone, I think he freaked out because he didn't have that rock who was his mother. And with a lot of devout Christians, it's so ironic to me that we're looking at a Bible, and then we're extrapolating that women are demons, that the life is scary, and whatever she indoctrinated with him, brainwashed with him, and she had her own demons as well. Whatever she did to him, she created a monster. She literally created a monster without feelings, emotion. And there was, separately from that, I wondered, Dori, what you think. He seemed so meek and gentle and sweet. Like he was nice and, I'm not saying he's a good person, but what does that mean? And Dr. John can also answer this. What does that mean for a person who can commit such heinous crimes, but also seem to be so kind and loving and generous and, easygoing and agreeable? And all he needed was a piece of apple pie with cheddar cheese, and he
Right.
just spilled it
Well,
out.
I'm going to say something very controversial.
Okay.
The photos that they showed in the documentary of Ed Gein, I thought he was kind of a looker. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, this guy.
He was cute, kind of cute.
I would not swipe left. I would swipe right. Um, But I know you mentioned like with the that he was a meek and mild mannered and the townspeople in Plainfield said that he was like, odd, but a nice guy.
Hmm.
How long have you known Mr. 7 years? 7 years. What kind of a man did you know him as? Well, a man is a nice man, just like anybody else. The only difference I'd say in the man, he seems to be a little odd.
When he was put in the institution after the murders were discovered and after all of the body parts were discovered, he was a model institution person who,
Yeah.
like, so I know that, obviously you probably have questions around that. I have questions to get more of like the professional, side of that. But I also thought for me, another controversial statement, but I enjoyed the fact that when his mother died and he went to the cemetery to dig up other ladies, they were age appropriate ladies. They weren't like young dames that he was
Hmm.
going after. He was digging up all these women, and the two women that he murdered were also older ladies.
Yep.
Again, obviously, the Oedipus mom complex that he has, but with all the Ted Bundys of the world, I was actually like, huh, Ed Gein,
Yeah.
just going after
It's
the oldies. Good for
he's
you.
just a mama's boy at heart.
Just,
So so was he in love with his mom, or did he just feel like he needed to be inside of her womb? What
yeah,
was
I
it?
don't know. I mean, honestly, I think probably both. Like if there's
Hmm.
one person that isolated you, and you're
Hmm.
that's the only person in your life day after day.
This is the duality of Gein. Part of it was a desire to have the physical presence of his mother back with him in that home, whereas obviously another part of the motivation had to do with desecrating the corpse.
But he did go out like when like that, Bloody Mary, they called her the barkeep woman that he killed. Like he did have like conversations and Bernice, the
Hmm.
hardware store lady that he also
Yeah.
murdered, he had like conversations with other women, but his mother always instilled in him that ladies were whores. They were all terrible people. So I don't know. Like, would a mom not want their children to ever have a relationship with anybody else but them? But Henry, the other brother, did have a
So
relationship.
one thing I learned from Dr. John from the Gwen Shamblin episode that we did before this is about how some people in a family are healthy and some can be unhealthy. And so he kind of explained how the difference between these two people, like he was able to get out. He had self-esteem. He had confidence. And I really think it has to do with self-esteem and the ability, maybe at some point, maybe some people are more apt to be brainwashed than others. But the ability for his brother, like who would you be? Would you be his brother or would you be Ed? If your mom was saying to you, Dori, no men are bad, men are evil, men will rape you, men will hurt you, men will be abusive to you. What at some point, if you started off your life that way and it went on and on, do you think you'd be strong enough to be Henry or would you end up being Ed?
That's a good question. Honestly, I really don't know because my mother was the absolute opposite. Like, Dory, why are you not dating more? Like, get out
Yeah,
there and meet. I don't know.
yeah.
Like, that's honestly, Stacey, that's a really good question because I wasn't sheltered as a
Hmm.
child, like
No,
my
yeah.
parents took us to like discos when we were
Yes.
children. I was 7 years old at Zorene's, a
Oh my
disco in
God.
Chicago.
My mother took me to see Saturday Night Fever when I was in second grade in the movie theater. My first words were, fuck and ball and mom and
Yeah,
dad.
I think I
So that's
honestly,
our life.
we would, maybe we're separated sisters.
Maybe
Maybe
we're
that's,
separated at birth, but my mother and your mother, I know you have a wonderful relationship with your mother. I have a really good relationship with my mom, but I could see myself being brainwashed by her
because she's so
because
domineering, because she has
she's
that, like,
domineering, but I really appreciate and listen to her advice. So if my mom said, men are bad and you have to be careful, I'm sure at some point I would think, because if my mom said to me, your boyfriend has a melon head, that's what she said about one of my boyfriends. He has a melon head. I couldn't see his head any differently after that. I'd break up with him.
but my mom said to me, like, my mom sheltered, my parents sheltered my sister and I. Like, we weren't allowed to cross the street. We weren't allowed to babysit because
Hmm.
my mother was afraid like something would happen. So, but I didn't, so even though I was sheltered like that, like I didn't think I didn't think the world was against me or the world was
Right.
scary or,
Hmm.
so I don't think so. I think maybe I would be more like the older brother, Henry.
It all comes down to isolation. When
Mhm.
you isolate people, that's how they get messed up. Because isolation causes so many things. First of all, they could put prisoners in isolation and it makes them go literally insane. You know what I mean? So, maybe it's the same thing when you're isolated, and most of the time cults isolate you. They try to systematically sort of tear down other relationships so that you only hear what they're saying and then they're able to manipulate you. But I don't think people are easily manipulated when they're out in the world because they can see other things, they can talk to other people and engage in other conversations. And that's why the Henry thing is so amazing to me, that he was able to think outside the box.
Ed Gein didn't start murdering people. Maybe his brother,
No.
because they did find the heads, like he could have been hit by a shovel or something, but
Hmm.
he didn't until the mother died, right? Like that's when he
Yes.
started. He wasn't really young when he started it. He started
Right.
doing it when she passed away and kept her like
Room.
place, the room where she lived in perfect condition while the rest of the
Pristine.
house looked like
Was
absolute shit. Like there was stuff
everywhere.
everywhere.
No electricity. They had to come in with flashlights. They had no idea what they were entering into. Can you imagine this guy bumps into something and is like, puts his flashlight on it, and it's a woman decapitated, hanging like a piece
Yeah.
of meat. And, I think he was, it's like a haunted house. And then he said at one point, he stuck his finger in something. He's like, I couldn't resist sticking my finger in this bag. And he pulls out a lock of hair.
They went in investigating with flashlights. It was pitch black because there was no electricity and no lights. And one of the lawmen felt something bump against his shoulder. He turned, shined his flashlight on it, and indeed, there was Bernice Warden hanging from the rafters, upside down with her head off and gutted like a deer.
So, I mean, to me, I wonder if he was really like, I'm gonna kill you. Was he evil, or was it just like, boom, and like
Shot them. He shot
all about,
them.
yeah, and all about getting to the next level, which was the body, getting the body, getting the
But
skin off
he only killed two from what they know,
that
but
we know of.
right, but he was going to the grave site to get all these
Right.
other women. And here's the
True.
thing, like you said, he's a meek little man.
Yeah.
He would have to like
How do you dig up a
I have
grave?
no strength. I have no strength. Like I could never climb up the rope in
He must have
grade
been strong.
school. What was
Oh,
it,
I
the
was never able to.
president's? The
I could never.
president's, what was that? The president's test where you had to do like a chin up, a pull, like you had to run
Can
the shuttle. I could
can
never
our
do that.
president do that?
Right.
Okay,
But
so let me ask you
but
something.
Ed Gein had to
Yeah, he's
shovel,
strong.
had to
Strong.
shovel and pull up these caskets and
How
then
did he get caught?
exhume the body. He must have been shoveling for like
Hours.
6 to 8 hours to get that's how much he needed to get these women out so that he could make earrings out of their own ears.
Nipple necklaces.
Nipple necklaces.
Investigators were completely stunned and appalled to discover this incredible collection of human body objects. And among the things they found were bowls that had been made from the tops of human skulls. They found a shade pull that was made from a set of women's lips.
And they had found other body parts there. Then you'd go out into what would be like a living room, and they found furniture, a lampshade that was made out of human skin, chairs that were upholstered in human skin.
They found face masks. Gein had apparently flayed the skin from the heads of the victims and preserved them and stuffed them with paper and hung them on the wall as decorations.
Do you think now would be an appropriate time to bring in the doctor?
I mean, I have so many questions for the
I
doctor.
do too. And I'm at this point now where, you and I are shooting the shit and, we're both, we're very easygoing people. We could never be manipulated. But I want to hear Dr. John's opinion about what he thinks of, and I have a lot of questions for him.
Doctor!
I've been waiting in the wings here. Should I come in here now?
You can come from behind the curtain, Dr. John.
Thank you for having me back. I was nervous about getting fired from this gig here. Not that I need another gig in my life, but
you don't.
But I want to make a statement before I answer any questions. If I had the power to do this, I think you both could have an honorary psychology degree, because much of what you said is so right on, and you're questioning an investigation of this case is, that's where we would go professionally with some of these things. So anyway, let's start with some questions and then I'll ramble. I've got a lot to say as well. You guys were great, and
I guess a big question for me, and sorry, Dori, if I'm cutting you off, because I have a lot. This might take a second session of us asking you questions, but how was a person able to turn off the gross factor and do these things without being nauseated or disgusted? Like, how do you turn that off? How does somebody go into, is it like when you're a Nazi and you just do things without thinking, you shoot? I mean, what is that mentality?
Two different concepts. We can get into Nazis maybe in some future episode, because they were following orders. Ed was following his own orders and his own view. If there's one big advance that I have given the field about these killers, it's that the only way we can get to really understand them is we have to get into their worldview, which most sane people would say it's crazy. But what is crazy? Crazy is defined by social norms, how everybody else behaves. And that answers your question, Stacey, is that how could he do that? He saw nothing wrong in doing it. Look at when he was arrested and he goes, yeah, kind of meek and mild. I did all these things, There was no, anger, hate. And if I can take off for a second, I think that's
what I mean.
That's a huge part of what you guys are talking about, is that he didn't do these things with hate.
Right.
He did not do it. What we see in, especially like spree killers, and sadly we had an incident today where a shooting at Florida State University. There's a whole difference between these serial killers and spree killers. The spree killers or shooters, etc., they hate. There's something they hate. They hate humanity. Look at that Maggioni kid. That's he hated this executive, and he hated the healthcare system and insurance, etc. Notice the difference between Ed and what he did. He didn't do these things to hate, and in fact, it was almost like they were trophies, and he, elevated things. So that's key. We have, again, it's all about getting into his worldview. And one last thing, and I'll want to get your comments. How can a person do this? We often forget, both of you and our audience, that at the core, we're animals. If you go through history, and this is where history is a great teacher, there's some really brutal things that society did. In early England, I forget the dates, but people would walk around London with knives and swords, and randomly a person would just stab another person, often for no reason. We're pretty primitive, and Ed is a very primitive guy. But again, it's animalistic, it's base activity, it's not sophisticated activity. That's where he's not part of the norm.
But I think that there's also question, you mentioned like the spree versus serial, but is Ed Gein a true serial killer? I don't know if he is, because he killed, and I don't know to be honest, I really don't know like what the difference is. And was there psychosis? Was he schizophrenic? Like, was
Yes.
he, or did he didn't kill before the mother, like we said. So can you talk a little
Oh
bit
yeah,
about that? Like
I'm
what
dying to
you
talk
think
about
about
that.
that?
I'm dying to talk about that because you brought this up earlier, Dori. And the question of why did he start to kill after his mother died? Well, I think the death of his mother gave him freedom to do what he did. Now, we always see a progression of violence in these people. So much of the material we have on Ed doesn't talk about his early years. I would suspect that he killed animals. We all suspect, especially from all the data we have, he probably killed his brother. And that was a tipping point for him. That was a point where I can do this. And then when mom dies, boom, the doors are open.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think mom's death was permission more than anything else. And another thing you guys brought up, and I want to get into real quick before I lose the thought, and that is he psychotic? Yeah, he's a crazy man, no question. And we get that evidence from the brother. I mean, even though we have this absolute also crazy mom, we have a brother who is relatively normal, as much as we can say. So there was something going on with Ed inherently. We call it functional, that there was a mental illness going on, guaranteed. But there's plenty of people out there walking the streets with mental illness and, working and having families, etc., that don't kill. So there's a lot of things that contribute here.
We also didn't mention too that his father was an alcoholic as well, like a raging. So there was like the substance abuse side of things. And even though this didn't get into if either child had any of that, definitely with Henry. It sounds like Henry went against the grain more than Ed did, that Ed was just entrenched in this world.
Yes.
And again, it goes back to the mom. You guys hit it on the head. I hope you don't mind me saying you guys.
Yeah, we're offended.
I'm wearing a mustache right now.
I don't know.
Dory,
I'm fine.
I know
Dori, will you?
these are our opening episodes, but I don't know what to call you guys. It's just, I said ladies, babes,
dolls,
whatever
chicks,
supermodels,
games, bitches. So, here's the deal. Dori and I are going to go to the table again and decide whether or not you're worthy to spend time with us. Okay, so keep
So it's
going,
like every
Miss.
episode is an audition for me, huh? Well,
Yeah.
let me tell you,
Keep going.
just don't pick that guy that was in the documentary, this Dr. Arndt. I hope he's not still.
Oh, yeah, no, let's not get him.
Well, because
No.
there's a big point he made, which I totally disagree with. One of
Okay.
his last statements was, "We just can never find out and explain what goes on with these people." Guess what, Dr. Arndt? Yes, we can. Yes, we
Oh,
can. We can figure out and understand why this happens. You got to dig into it. It takes not only psychology and clinical observation, but it takes a little bit of a investigative or police kind of attitude, and that's kind of why I'm brought in cases, because I kind of have both. So we can explain what's going on with these people and why they did it. Now, we took off when I was asking about ladies or broads or, et cetera.
yeah.
The point I wanted to make was that this whole thing of his mom and the difference between Henry. See, here, Dr. Arndt, we're going to disagree with you and we can explain some things. This goes back to, if you're primitive, if you're low IQ, if you're almost childlike, like Ed was in a lot of ways, and I think you guys might agree, you ladies, then what is again, goes back to worldview. Think of children as they grow up. Your worldview is just your parents.
Right.
Until you get like into pre-adolescent years and then adolescent years, then your world kind of opens up. Ed being so primitive and probably having a mental illness, and this gentle guy, his whole world was mommy as opposed to Henry. So everything that mommy said was like, that was his Bible. I was like, oh, this is what's going on. And it wasn't an anger towards women, that even though his mother espoused that, I think he was making trophies and what's the term?
Celebrating.
Yeah.
We just said that at the same time.
Yeah, we did.
I totally should be a shrink. I don't know why I didn't go to med school.
I might get,
no,
I'm sure I can go online and get the ability to give you guys degrees.
Yeah, perfect. Do you think Ed was a little bit simple? Like, was he
primitive? Notice
did he have
I'll be
primitive
using in our episode the word primitive. And I like the word because it wraps up IQ, social skills, dependency, etc. This is our definition of primitive, Ed Gein, just a primitive guy.
Yeah.
Didn't even know how to keep his house,
No, he didn't. He didn't have electricity or running water, I don't think.
Yeah.
Dori, did you have something? Because I'm dying to ask one more, but I want you to do first.
No, go for it. I'll ask after you. I know we both have so much
I know.
Oh my gosh, I want to ask.
Yeah, there's so much I want to say too.
I just want to get in John's brain. So, Dr. John, if you were brought in to evaluate Ed Gein, what would you say? And also, when you're brought in to evaluate criminals, what is the purpose and intention of doing so? Like, what are you looking for? You're not a forensic psychologist, are you?
Oh, yes, sure.
Oh, so you are a forensic.
Yeah.
Maybe should have.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we should have interviewed you. I've known you for 30 years, and yet that's newest. I've learned something new. You are a forensic psychologist. So tell us, if you came in to study Ed Gein and to give some information, what would you say?
It's singular. You're brought in as, the doctor, the expert, to really find out if he is insane, which is a legal term. Can he stand trial or not? And notice in the documentary, they put him away in, clearly he did the murders, so you have to lock somebody like this up.
Right.
But notice that he was at first put into a hospital for the criminally insane. And then when he was deemed that he was, safe to go into a prison population, he's gone back and I think he was almost like retried and, then
he stood trial. They deemed that he was okay to stand trial, but then he went back to the institution, right?
Right.
Right. So to answer Stacey's question, you have one job, which is to give the courts, the police, whoever, the determination whether he can stand trial or not. Is he legally insane? That has a wide bandwidth with, by the way. It's hard to say bandwidth, by the way. Blah, 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 blah.
Bandwidth, by the way.
By the bandwidth, by
Could
the way.
could Ed Gein be rehabilitated?
No,
No?
no.
Okay. Not at all. Like even because he's mild mannered, was there a way that somebody could get in there and really
Not in a general society, but
Okay.
within a prison.
I just wanted to know.
Within a prison setting, you know,
Mhm.
this individual has to be cared for like they're in a box. You do this, you go
Right.
here, and he functioned well. You know, as you guys pointed out, that he was a model prisoner because he just did what he's supposed to do. In his whole life, nobody did that. Nobody said, "Hey, you know, you don't dig up graves and take people's nipples." You know, it's like
It's amazing. He got that from, I can't
Yeah.
believe he got that from his mother's teachings. He's like, well, maybe, so instead of falling in love with a woman and marrying her, maybe I'll just,
collect nipples.
collect body parts and
Yeah,
store
right.
them in my home. Like,
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? So it really like twists. Now, Dori, did you have an additional question?
Well, I want to make, so in addition to this documentary, I also, because I was then, I got to find out more about him.
Mhm.
I watched The World's Most Evil Killers on Peacock and
Mhm.
the episode on Ed Gein. And one of the things that they had mentioned is, and kind of going like piggybacking off of what the doctor just said, um, he did do well in the institution. And it was because the thinking is he had routine. And I don't know if what your thoughts are on that he went in for, I don't know, the first in 11 years, then he went to trial and they said bring him back to the institution and lived out his life until he passed away from cancer. But what do you think about that? Like, because the mother obviously gave him that routine, right? Like that was his
Right.
routine. And then she died. And then, like you said, like he was like a free for all, like, okay, now I can just go and,
No
do
structure. No
right.
structure.
Yeah,
But was it an
exactly.
evil intent or was it just a like, I can do whatever I want? And then he goes back into the institution where he has that
Right.
structure and then he's, quote unquote, okay.
Remind me to talk about evil because you guys brought that up right before I was
Yes.
brought on here. I want to talk, but let me address the first part of your
Yes.
question. His mother gave him the rules of life per her purview, right? Women
Right.
are bad, the Bible is truth, and got to follow this, whatever. So he's controlled. He's controlled
Right.
in prison. And that's what if I can wax philosophical here about the whole field of mental health for a second, and also gives the audience some of my prejudices, that's a problem with how we treat these severely mentally ill people in the age of therapists that go, well, if that's something you like to do, well, then I guess it's okay as long as you're not hurting someone. When I treat people in therapy, there are rules, there are things we know in the science of this field that you got to go, no, you don't do that. Sorry, this is not appropriate. So you see rules, and Stacey said the right word, which is structure.
Right.
It's very important for a severely mentally ill person to have structure. And that's why he held it together when mom was living. If she had ever found out he was digging up graves and, taking nipples and vaginas and things like that, she would have probably went ape on him and, whatever. But she, again, as I said before, she dies and boom, Katie barred a door.
That being said, I had two things to ask. How does a person, and this is like no pun intended, put on a mask of sanity if they're insane? Like, how does how do you do that? I mean, it's incredible to me that
That's a
how do
bigger,
they do that?
Stacey, that's probably another case where we should really talk about
Yeah,
this. Ed didn't do that,
so you didn't.
no.
No.
Everybody knew he was like the town weirdo,
Mhm.
you know, which is an
But he
important,
babysat. It said he babysat people's kids. Can you
yeah, can you
imagine?
imagine?
Hey,
You
kids, you
know,
want to play ball? Here's a
yeah,
human
right.
head.
That and I think that, they did not think he was normal, but he was probably available and probably cheap,
Hmm.
with the cost of childcare.
Yeah.
Uh, so no, he didn't put on a mask of normality. The
Okay. So he
guys
didn't.
that worked with him said, he was always kind of strange, he was always, but he
Hmm.
was a good worker, so we forgive him, etc. So that this doesn't apply to Ed. Maybe it'll be on some future cases where we can talk about, maybe Bundy or something like that.
Yeah, because it's weird, like Bundy, there's this sort of disconnect and disassociation. And
Yeah.
so I just think it's interesting. But one other thing about Ed and his appearance is that he has this posture that was almost, it
Mm.
was like he had this pristine, upright, perfect posture. There was nothing sort of, you know, like
I can just imagine
gross about
I can just
him.
imagine mommy saying, "Stand up straight, Eddie."
Yes. Yeah. The posture that he had, it just showed me that he was trained. It felt like he was trained,
Well, it goes
you
back.
know?
Dory said something, and I really loved her comment. He was a looker. He wasn't
He
a
was.
good-looking guy, which is
Thank you.
important for us to
Stand
all
by
know.
it.
Yeah, it's important for us all to know about these people. They
Hmm.
they look like anybody else.
What about the fact that he wore that female skin suit and paraded around? Do you think, Doctor, is there any possibility that he was possibly
Trans?
transgender, a cross
Hmm.
dresser? Is there any thinking of that? Or was
Correlation?
it just like, why would he wear it? Like, did he want to be his mother? Did he want to be a woman? What do you think about that?
I think
Mm.
your last statement is where I would go with it. Again, I wouldn't be able to diagnose whether he was transgender or gay, etc., without talking to him and digging a little deeper. But I will say, to me, for Ed, again, we go back to that primitiveness and that almost undeveloped person. That kind of experimentation is, I'm going to shock you guys, is not that uncommon with kids as they explore sexuality. There's a lot of very macho male heterosexual men are walking around this world that when they were 8, 9, 10 years old, they tried on mommy's dress and maybe have masturbated, you know,
Yeah. But this
because
is an older man
but the
wearing,
undevelopedness of him.
but right, because you're saying he's childlike even
Yes.
as he's older.
He
Yeah, I
Gotcha.
was
mean,
stuck at a developmental period that was just stopped,
it's
undeveloped.
so interesting that you say that because one of my questions, which you're answering, was, did his mother stunt his growth by infantilizing him, like
Absolutely.
making
Yeah.
him so just
Yeah, and
babyish,
she might have seen she couldn't do that with Henry for whatever reason, and so that's her little boy, that's her little child, and
Her little project,
yeah,
which
I
she
wouldn't
probably
be
didn't
surprised if
realize.
she, even at his age, had a spoonful of oatmeal and goes, "Open your mouth, here comes the plane," etc. Treated him like an infant, etc.
I mean, this whole thing about the woman, the Oedipal complex. What happened to the mother? I mean, think about that. What is the psychology behind fanaticism for her? And this is a bigger topic, but just a brief
And I
overview of
guess
Augusta.
I can only guess, and the key is always the key with a woman like that is what happened in this marriage. The guy was an alcoholic. Again, let's just extrapolate. I'll just based on cases that I've worked on. The guy was alcoholic, maybe physically abusive, and controlling and putting her down. So the only refuge that she had was the Bible, and following the Lord. And Now she did have the balls, shall we say, that's a clinical term, to leave him and get away, from him with the kids. Which wow, there's some health there. But I got a feeling that that marriage was the key to just breaking this woman. And
Oh
in
yeah.
this kind of world, this kind of society, she might have married this guy when she was 17, 18, something like that, and just dominated by this, and from a primitive background. And this is what you do: you follow the man, because the man is king, etc.
Right. I want to know your opinion. Which character from pop culture, the Texas Chainsaw, the Buffalo Bill, the Norman Bates, which character creeps you out the most?
I want to add
Yeah.
another one to the list that it's going to surprise everybody. I would add another inspiration for this character came from Ed Gein, and that's this series that was just on about a year ago.
You mean, are you talking about, no, you're talking about the Penguin.
The Penguin. That's it.
Penguin.
Oh my God. Did you watch the Penguin, Dori?
No, I couldn't get through the first episode,
But
but
look
okay,
at the
I know what we're talking about.
Look at the
I've
parallels.
watched that episode. I've watched the entire thing.
I did
and all
too.
I did was walk around and tell people, and they go, "Is that Marvel?" No, I don't want to watch it. I'm like, "No, you've got to watch this. This is great acting."
And
What were you going to say, John?
If people watch that series again, there was a lot of Ed Gein and mommy aspects to it. I got a feeling
you're
that
so right.
I have a feeling that the writer, had that somehow in their unconscious or conscious based that relationship
This is your
on
mother.
Eddie.
I do think that question is interesting. And I know we've got to kind of wrap it up here soon, but I would say
Never.
the unassuming crazy to me is scarier. Like that. Did you say who I identify with or who is I?
No, I don't think any of us identify with.
Right.
I want to know who you are.
Scariest?
Who's the scariest to you?
The scariest to me is definitely the unassuming. So anyone who presents themselves as
normal,
quote unquote normal,
like Ted Bundy.
Right. I didn't watch Texas. I've never seen that. But again, I know the reference. I know all of that. But that person looked like a crazy person, like with the mask and all that. It's always, to me, the person who looks
It's going to be interesting to answer Stacey's question. In my view, I agree with you, Dori. I'm not attracted to slasher movies and all that because it's so outrageous. And this is not what we see. It's the unknown, it's the person that, walking amongst us and just, can at any point just flip, like we kind of saw with Eddie, when mom dies, he boom.
And you see that with Oz in the Penguin, where,
Exactly.
his mother, everything was about his mother and protecting his mother, and his mother, more like Augusta, manipulated the crap out of him.
Yeah.
Oh, Oz, honey, you're gonna be the best there is. Oh, you're gonna be the best. Thank you, mommy. Kissing. It's just really creepy.
It's very much. I think that would be a great portrayal of Eddie and his mom. I'm sure that kind of stuff went on. What can I do for your mom? And that's why
what can I do?
Line to her in the house, right? Is that just I want to do everything for mom. I'm keeping her world, the same.
You're so right. Gosh, a penguin killed his who did he kill? Can't remember. He left him in the
tunnel.
sewer,
yeah, right.
the tunnel. Horrible scene, Dori. I know you couldn't get through it, but the thought of the fact that they were locked up and then he went home and he was watching movies with his mom. And there was this feeling where you knew as the audience that these kids were like screaming to get out. Oh my
God, Stacey.
All this time passes. It's awful.
Think of the parallel. Ed killed his brother.
I know.
The Penguin, Oz, kills his brother. Yeah, this writer was influenced by Eddie.
It was.
Let's add him to the list of. I think Dori's right. Let's get back to your question. Of all these iterations of Ed, what is the scariest for you? And I think Dori said it was the one who, which one would you say, Dori?
Norman Bates.
It would definitely be The Norman Bates, those that really truly though are smart and honest. So not the Ed Gein. I mean, he presented again, quote unquote, but he was odd. But
Yeah.
it's those
Right.
who are very intelligent to me that you'd never know, and they are psychotic. Those are the ones that scare me the most.
Yeah.
That's, and I totally agree with you. So this character, Ed Gein, influenced so much pop culture, and they say that he was the most famous and the most gruesome, which is hard to believe for me. I mean, I think it's gross, but I don't know why it's the grossest. But maybe
I think
we'll
because
reserve
maybe
that.
his House of Horrors, because of what he
Yeah,
did
the
to all
skin
the
and the body
corpses.
parts and
Yeah, that's why it was the most disgusting. But I don't know, after watching a ton of these, I don't know if he was the most ruthless.
Exactly.
we'll have
Well,
an
you know,
episode on rating
Bodies.
the ruthlessness of killers. Dahmer is up there, but I think even Ed takes Dahmer's actions to another level.
he does, but Dahmer, to me, and I know we're rapping, but Dahmer was, to me, walking around society, that was scary to me because he was cute and would hang out in bars and people
Yeah.
liked him and he was kind of adorable and drinking beers, and that is so scary to me. But that's another example of primitive, which you're saying primitive behavior, which could only allow him to eat a human heart and to store all that stuff. But for me, Dahmer is scarier than Gein. I am so excited for us to continue this amazing journey talking about cults, crimes, and killers. And I couldn't think of a better team than Dr. Maya and
So
Dori.
I can make it to the next episode.
We'll talk. I mean, Dori and I have a meeting. We have like a 3-hour meeting.
I'm already voting. You're in.
Oh,
he's in? All right, fine.
Yeah.
He's in. He's in.
He's in for all of them.
Until you and I get our degrees in psych, we can do like an online course now until we get
I
our
think
degrees.
there's got to be in one of these universities that are shams, like $57, and you can get a PhD or something.
Perfect. Well, this has been a perfectly disgusting episode, and I can't wait to see you guys again.
Take care.
You too.
Hard candy.